Hey guys, welcome to our Valor Mancast. I'm joined here today with Bryce Maurer, pastor over at Crossings Community Church over in Livingston, and joined over here with Shawn Olson from C3. And just give them introduce yourself and what your role is on the Man Camp or Valor team.
I am your shadow.
Yes.
Yes. So I just assist you in all things Valor Man Camp.
Yeah.
It's a heart and passion of mine to see men get excited about a move of God in their families and in their churches. So, yeah, let's go, God.
Yeah, we've been doing this since 2019 or so, doing these man camps, men's retreats out of Temple Hills. And
Man, I remember one year we had like 15 guys.
yeah,
And now we'll probably be pushing 100 this year.
yeah,
Easy.
Yeah.
It's just something that, like, I don't know, just Man Camp itself is just such a, like I said, just excited for what God wants to do in men's lives and their families through something like a Man Camp, like just getting out in the woods, being men, pursuing God, pursuing the presence of God. So So Bryce is our assistant director, and he does a lot more than that. He does a lot of things for camp. He's heads up all the recreation, all the gladiator games, and the pre-session games, and the bar Abba and everything that I don't want to do, basically. Just kidding. But and then over here we got Shawn Olson. So introduce yourself and what you're doing. Your role is on the camp team.
Sure. So Michael at C3, Pastor Michael, invited me to pray about this and join the team. And I said, without a doubt, I'll do it. Didn't even have to think about it because of what Valor meant last year to my son and myself. It's a man camp like no other man camp, and it's a bonding with you and your son, or other young men like you had, Bryce, last year, fatherless boys.
Yeah.
And then the other men. I mean, everybody comes around and supports you, and I'm here to help with the bar Abba and camp setup, and then the shooting range.
Oh yeah.
Make sure that goes along safely.
Yeah.
And I've got my older son coming to run with his buddy that do training and gun range.
Oh, cool.
Gun handling.
Yeah.
And shooting.
Okay.
So they'll be running that part.
Okay.
So it'll be a lot safer
Yeah.
of an experience for everybody.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, won't shoot the water line this year.
Yeah.
I just got an email today, like saying, "Hey, well, there's a big leak in the sprinkler system." I was like, "Oh yeah."
Put some duct tape on it.
Put some duct tape on it, it'll be fine. Or get some flex tape. There you go.
There you go.
But speaking of, as we talk about Man Camp, the registration is open for Man Camp, and so you can go to valorministries.org, or even you can go to valormancamp.com, and it goes straight to the Man Camp website, and get all the information about Man Camp and how to register. And this year we have a new thing. So we've decided to take the Women's Retreat and Man Camp and merge them together under one banner. So our Valor is now Man Camp and Women's Retreat. It's Valor Women's Retreat. I want to change the name to Valor Lady Camp. It'd be fun, but my wife keeps saying no. But
You have no authority there.
I have no authority there. But so we have valorministries.org, and so all the information on the website there. But so a special opportunity this year is that if men and women sign up together, there's a couples registration that makes camp even cheaper. So it's, instead of it being because camp is $150 per camp, or if couples register together, it's $275. So save $25. So there you go. Register now. So today I wanted to focus on talking about, like last week we talked, or last month I guess, we talked about discipleship and how we grow as men in discipleship and how we train one another, walk with one another. And this week I wanted to talk about how are we as men training up the next generation in our churches, because we have older men, younger men who are older, but they're like new in their faith. So how are we helping, the older, more mature people who've been, Christians and in the faith longer? How are we being good stewards to disciple the next generation? And so I wanted to think about that in terms of how do you see that? How do you see discipleship operating in your churches?
Well, I think it's more what I experienced firsthand is just plugging in with a group of men that's like-minded and has been to Valor Man Camp. Just kind of growing from that, experiencing a tighter connection, and encouraging young men as well as other men in the church to come see what Valor's about, because it was pretty much life-changing for me and my son.
Yeah.
And watching him step into manhood and what that's meant to him and what he's done, and it's just amazing.
So, Shawn, explain that to me. Like, explain what are some of those experiences that you guys had at Man Camp that you felt were really transformative for you and your son specifically?
Sure. It was spending time with him in a situation or an environment that was different than what we normally do with camping or hunting. I had a lot of good experiences with my dad hunting and backpacking, and so it brought it all back around. We chose not to stay in a cabin. We stayed in a tent down by the river, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So as that bonding, it was about sharing in biblical study that Valor provides, and the sessions that Valor did throughout that, and then him opening up on his struggles in some of the small group breakaways that we did, as well as me and what I got from it. And he could see, it's like peeling an onion. He could see his dad was getting peeled down to the heart, or an artichoke, getting down to the heart of what his dad was about. And I could see a lot of things with my son that I didn't ever see before. So it brings tears to my eyes to see the bonding with that. Just the participation and watching him go through Bar Abba and become a man and really take control of being, transitioning from boyhood to manhood. Just watching him come about.
Yeah.
And there's been a few times lately or throughout the last year where my wife's like, well, Shawn, I don't know if we should do that and allow him to do that. I said, wait, Valor Man Camp and going through Bar Abba, he agreed to be responsible as a man and a person of, or a outstanding person in the society. And that I said, you got to let him grow up. We can't sit there and, treat him like he's a boy anymore.
Right.
And that helped my wife a lot.
Shawn, give us some examples about how that played out. Sure. My son went through Bar Abba with your son.
Yeah.
And there were moments after camp, and I think it's true for discipleship for even grown men, right? You need accountability with other men that can call things out in your life, because that's what a disciple is. It's a learner. So give us some examples of like when you got back home after Valor Man Camp where you had to remind River of this commitment that he made. Did you have any situations like that?
Yeah, I mean, he's been dating a gal for the last 8-9 months, good Christian gal, and they've known each other for years. But, they're at that hormonal stage, right, where we all remember those days, right? And
this is why
we have to tell them.
Get that worried during the stage. We're like, we remember.
But it's reminding him, your actions are, I don't want to hear what your words are. I want to see your actions and be responsible for that.
That's good.
Because there's so many times that your hormones can take over, your testosterone in his case, and you make a stupid decision, and it can alter your life. Let's do it the godly way. Right. And we have conversations with him and his girlfriend, even last night. What's this to look like if we do this? If we go camping over the 4th of July. What's the sleeping arrangement? What are we going to do to, and they both come forward and say, this is what we're going to do. I've really seen a change in River becoming a man, and not, we even had conversation last night about some of his friends and how he may be distancing himself just because of how they're acting. And he's taken the more upper manly position instead of the foolish child boy.
Even it seems like you're saying that, it seems like he's going in a different trajectory. It's almost because that he had that experience of, I'm a man, my dad and all the men of our church are treating me differently as more. They're expecting more of me because I've recognized, I come to this place where I am recognized by all these men as a man. So I'm going to be treated as a man, and they're going to training me. Whereas like maybe the other people around him in his life maybe don't have that same, haven't had that same experience. So they're still in their childish thinking, and so they haven't had that experience, like you were talking about, like with some guys that don't have fathers that came to man camp last year and went through the whole bar Abba. I want to take a moment, just there's maybe some guys listening that are like, what's bar Abba? Like we're going to you have a bar at camp, So I just wanted to pause a little bit, maybe
The bar of the Father.
the bar of the Father. So Abba, is father in Scripture. But so at man camp we wanted to do a coming of age ceremony. That we felt that all these cultures all around the world have these ceremonies where boys become men, and it's not just that, you're now a man. It's like no, like everyone around you expects of you as a man. And actually in the Jewish culture, it's called a bar mitzvah. But mitzvah means like law, commandment. So that they actually become a son of the law. And we're like, well, that's not really what we're doing as in the church. Like we're not becoming part of the law. It's like we're becoming part. We are growing as men, as sons of the Father. And so the origin of bar Abba comes from that bar mitzvah in terms of when they turn 13, they are now expected to fully participate as men in the worship of Yahweh. In the temple, they do their own sacrifices. They do their own, sacrifices for sin or for fellowship offerings. Like they do their own worship, and so basically, like their faith they're now responsible for their own faith.
Yeah,
and they're responsible for their own lives. Yeah. And so it's like, I guess we could say like 18 when a boy turns like 18 in our society, it's almost like this weird unspoken like you're now a man because you can leave the house, you can do this, like there's a line at 18, you can smoke cigarettes now, like whatever it is, but so having this recognition of you are now responsible to God for your faith, you are now responsible to this church for your activities as a man, your actions, exactly.
And I've even seen how he approaches when he's introduced to other people, how he looks them in the eye, shakes their hand, is polite. Even like we were down in Lake Havasu last week and, got in the truck, pulled the boat out, and I said, all right, River, you drive home. And my sister-in-law about died that I'm letting a 15-and-a-half-year-old drive the big truck and the big boat through Lake Havasu traffic.
Wow.
I said, he's a man. He's got to learn, and that's what insurance is for.
You got insurance.
Right? So, but, he's got to learn. I'd rather be learning with him, next to him, than having him trying to figure it out on his own and navigate on his own.
Right.
So, and she calmed down. But,
yeah.
And he did great.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's just I think so many parents nowadays, they want to helicopter parent their kid, or they're hovering over them all the time, or they want to micromanage them. They don't want them to experience pain or suffering or frustration or whatever else we all had to go through. They want to make it all easy.
Right.
And I think this allows them to experience life while they're still somewhat being looked over by you.
Right. It seems like this time of life where it's before, after boys turn 13 and before they're going to graduate and leave the house, it's like they're a man intern. Like there is an internship where they're making the mistakes, they're being entrusted with the responsibilities, and they're failing, and we're walking them through what that looks like to reconcile or to do, I wouldn't say to learning how to do better, learning how to correct it. But it's like this, it's the ability to fail with someone who is for you, right? So that they can encourage them and correct them, disciple them, and show them the better decisions, but giving them the freedom to fail. Yeah. We need that freedom.
And as a father, it's helped me as well, because I'm not perfect in fathering, and he can attest to that, and all my kids can. But I remember Pastor Chris Blackmore years ago. He says, God didn't give us kids to raise them only. He gave us kids to finish raising us.
That's
I like that.
That is so true, because man, there's been some points my kids have brought up. I'm like, dang, sorry, I failed you, but
Yeah. What about you, Bryce? Like, what does that look like for you guys for your church, for like passing on discipleship to the next generation, like in your church to Shane, like your relationship with Shane?
Well, I think that discipleship, for the most part, trickles from the top down. And I don't mean like from the pastor down to the lay people. I mean from the patriarchs of the church, the patriarchs of your family. I mean, we look at our families, and who do we usually look to? We look to Grandpa.
Yeah.
And Grandpa passed something down to me, and I pass it down to my kid, and I expect Grandpa to speak into my kid's life too. So I like that approach to it, but that doesn't always work, because maybe an older man just came to Jesus.
Right.
Maybe the way that you're raising your son, he actually has something to add to his life. So I don't like to get stuck in a discipleship model and it has to work this way.
Right.
Because this is the whole point of the Bar Abba, is raising up young men who know now to stand up when they meet another man, look him in the eyes, and firmly shake his hand. Years ago in San Diego, I had the privilege to watch this modeled to me, not necessarily from a Christian standpoint, but my friend Aaron had 5 sons, and I was a part of most of his kids' bar mitzvahs, if you would call it that.
Yeah.
And I always thought, man, when my kid turns 13, I want to do something like this. And then so we had a discussion, Alan, you and I, a couple years ago, and we put it together last year. We ran the first one. What a privilege that our boys got to run that. So the discipleship model there is like, we're setting this up for your son now when it's his turn. And then discipleship, again, trickles down. So this year, the boys that graduated as young men, they'll be the ones that help run the course now.
Right.
Because they've experienced it, and that's what discipleship is passing down knowledge to somebody else.
Right. Yeah. I'm so stoked about that. Like just the boys, being active in that, perpetuating that for the next generation, and like to where Jackson in a few years will come and he'll be a part of that in 4 summers, and like be able to join into that. And because of the fruit of River and Shane and the other guys that were a part of that, like they're now running the course for them, and they've experienced it, and they're bringing other people into that same experience. And I think that's where, like, in our lives and our faith, that's where we see discipleship most effectively in the church, right? Like one of the things that we have at our church is this, the mentality of what does it look like to measure growth? Like we don't measure like, butts and bucks. A lot of like all this stuff. I mean, butts and bucks are nice. People being saved in people's lives being transformed, and you being able to keep the lights on is a nice thing. You're measuring where people came from, and we always the 3 is like this: imitate, initiate, and instigate. Is when you teach someone something, they're learning how to imitate you. Teaching my son to shake someone's hand, look him in the eye. Well, they have to see me do it. And like, kind of like this, like when you shake someone's hand, shake their hand and look them in the eye, right? And so it's like my son then can see me do that, and then he knows what to do and how to imitate that same thing, right? And then the hope, of course, would be that outside of my guidance of him, that he would start initiating that himself, initiating that on his own. Like whenever he goes and introduce himself to another man, like he's looking him in the eye and shaking his hand without having to be prompted, right? And then he has the younger brother or his son, and now he's teaching him how to do the same thing. And so it's this process of transformation, this process of growth and maturity, and just discipling someone into the godliness, that righteousness, that masculinity, authentic masculinity that that God desires to see in our children, right?
Yeah, and that's what's missing from society, as they're trying to more or less feminize the men, the young men, and they're starting younger and younger. And that's what really spoke out to me about Valor, is this is about men, and even your little teaching on churches led by women usually fail. you know, and that's because God put man at the headship, right? And teaching the younger men to come up and to be the headship over the whole church and the family. And I think when you have a fatherless child, they kind of wander,
Right.
you know, whether it's a male or a female. And that's why you're seeing the collapse in our society with everything that's going on.
Yeah. It's an interesting statistic they've been doing recently that they, it was a research that they had done on, because normally they'd always done those research projects on like single parent homes versus married, you know, husband and wife in the house, you know, mom and dad in the home versus just simply a single family home, right? Single parent. But and like I said, like this is not. I don't say these statistics in order to like, you know, bash women. I'm not talking about that at all. It's more so just like to understand, because, you know, single moms they work hard. I mean, they do what the best that they can, you know, with the situation that they've got, and a lot of times it's because of the deficit of a father or the deficit of a manly, like a godly
Engaged father.
Yeah. Abusive fathers or neglectful fathers, absent fathers, you know, they might be physically present but not there mentally or
Or they're at work
emotionally or at work all the time, right? But the statistic, they were like, let's look at the statistic between men and women, single parent homes. And so they did the research. And so like all the statistics of like single parent homes of like, certain percentage, I wish I had the statistics in front of me, but I don't, but just the high statistics of single parent homes, that the kids are more likely to be in jail, they're more likely to suffer in poverty, they're more likely to fail school, drop out of school, not go to college, like all the doom and gloom, you know, statistics that we see in these, you know, in these, you know, statistical, you know, spit outs. But then they took those statistics and subdivided them into single parent, you know, mom, single parent dad. And the single parent dad statistics were almost as healthy as a married couple. So it's that masculinity is what's missing from the homes.
Okay.
And talking about looking at society, I saw this you know, that kids, boys and girls, they both need authentic, good masculinity in their lives. And so that is so inspiring to me as a husband and as a father, and the power that we have as men to impact culture, to impact change, to impact life in our you know, in our lives, in our families, in our churches, you know. And so how do we lead? It's not that, you know, like I said, you know, in the garden, it's not that God said you can have responsibility if you want it. It's like, no, you're the one responsible, you know, for the success or failure of your family, you know, whether you abdicate or whether you engage with who God has called you to be. And so I guess, you know, the question is like within our families, how do we, like, in our churches, like we see these single parents and their kids, right? Or we might see, you know, families who like dad might be there, might not be there, like I said, either working all the time, or maybe absent. Like maybe we see these families where we see the mom and the kids in the church. So like, how do we encourage? How do we as leaders in the church, as men in the church, see these as opportunities to engage with these younger men, these younger boys or girls? Like, how do we help, in essence, like lend our masculinity to homes that desperately need it?
Yeah. Well, and that's what was impressive with Bryce when he brought those boys that didn't have fathers and was pouring into them and allowed all of us to pour into them, you know, because they probably haven't had that experience. And you could kind of tell. And when they got that confidence that other men were looking at them and saying, hey, you can do this, you could see their spirits lift, you know, and it was amazing to watch those boys transform, you know. And then, you know, following up the men that are alongside them going forward, they're going to pour more into them, which they've never had. And Bryce, you could talk about that, if that's made a difference in those boys' life.
Sure, because when you look at the statistics, it's not a bashing of women.
No.
The single moms they're working it from both ends.
100%. Yeah.
What it's a reflection on is the absence of men in the home.
Yes, 100%.
Most of the single mom homes aren't because the husband died. It's because he abandoned his family. And that is greatly affecting the youth, not just of America, but of the world. So to be able to grab a couple of boys from our church, walk them through Bar Abba, and introduce them now as young men. Like, that's one of the things that I have to remember is, like, when I address these kids now, they're not kids anymore.
Right.
They're young men.
Right.
And like, I think one of, like, the coolest things about that whole thing was, like, calling the mom, explaining the process and asking for permission. And both moms were ecstatically yes when their reply was. And they know the value of that. As men, we are to lead. It's our biblical mandate. And so to be able to help these kids that are coming from fatherless homes step into that. Right. And then, like you said, Shawn, like, just having the other men surround them too and pour into them. And it's so meaningful, and the residual effects of it will last for generations to come.
Yeah. Well, and too, like, even thinking, I've had a few experiences with this myself, just like with kids that didn't have a father. Like, you should even teach them how to change their oil, like spending time with them, pouring into them masculine, just a masculine presence in their lives. You know, not to say that I'm the most masculine person in the world, but but that pouring in, you know, that masculinity, that I wouldn't say just attention, but the affection of the masculine, the focus of of a man into a boy's life, into a young man's life. Even if it's, just, training them. And a lot of times us guys, we like to be doing something when we're spending time together, not just like coming around a table and you just yapping. We're like, here, let's work on the car so I can look at the engine block while I'm bursting into tears as I'm pouring out my life. And so I'm not looking at you in the eye, like telling you about all my life's troubles, but I can just be focusing on this carburetor, but this, like, how do we training, boys into, like I said, even the basics of how to wield responsibility, personal responsibility, how to change your oil, how to change your tire, how to change out a battery. Like, so walking with people in these, physical things, but even seeing how do we take, this thought pattern of, like, teaching them something like that they can imitate and then to initiate in their own lives and help them to, initiate to imitate and initiate things in their own lives that are godly masculinity. It's like, we talked about the definitions of masculinity are, true, authentic, godly, biblical masculinity accepts responsibility, rejects passivity, leads courageously, and invests eternally. So what are some ways in which you feel like you can show, River or some other, teenager or kid at C3 at your church or in your life, how to, accept responsibility, reject passivity, lead courageously, or invest eternally?
Yeah. And, looking at that, a lot of the men that went to Valor Man Camp, I'll see them come up to my son River and talk to him, and they engage, and River's confident to talk to them. They ask him questions. How are things going? And it's nice to see him engage at at that level with those men and answering the questions that they ask him. And I'm impressed with Todd's son from C3. Todd's blind, and his son Matthew came alongside him that entire weekend and helped his dad, in a servant type capacity, which was really nice to see. Yeah. And for a young man like that to do that, to serve his dad in that capacity is pretty cool. Yeah. So I think it's, I don't want to focus on me, but when we have our kids and they're around other people, other grown-ups and adults, they're like, Shawn, your kids are amazing. I can't believe they do what they do. They're respectful. They're not belligerent. They're not any of the things that you see in society today on a whole. I mean, they have their slippage moments, but, they're respectful and they're uplifting. And we get compliments all the time. And that comes from not just me, but from my wife pouring into them. Yeah. And then other kids around them want to come to our house, spend time with us, because we engage, and we do. Like I remember a summer where my oldest daughter was growing up, and we knew we only had a year or two left, and we do Taco Tuesdays, and we are able to pour into the kids on Tuesday. And some of those kids, they don't come from a family that feeds them all the time. It's go get what's out of the cupboard. So it's kind of nice to be able to pour into kids like that.
Right.
And, I got lots of friends that do youth group type things at their house. And they invite 20, 30 kids over. And it's good to see. But to answer your question, Alan, it's more about watching these boys and engaging with them in church outside of Valor, man camp. And so it'll be fun to see what happens this coming year, being, not so new to the church and being able to identify these boys. Because last year I was more focused on my son and my relationship. This year it'll be cool to be able to watch them. But it was cool to see all the men that their sons are growing and they're pouring into River. I see them talking to other kids that were at Valor Man Camp and how they poured into. So it's more about watching those older men and what they're doing and saying, I need to do that more.
So, we can see a lot of the ways in which men are discipled by looking to see how Jesus did it. And how did Jesus disciple? I love the word discipleship is not in the Bible. There's to disciple as a verb was like to make someone into a disciple, into a follower of Jesus. But the action in which you poured into someone and helped them to grow in their faith, helped them to grow in their life, was discipline. So like they discipline, Jesus disciplined his disciples. Now, in the word in our culture, it has kind of the weird connotation of like, disciplining my son, spare the rod, spoil the child, But to discipline is just simply to teach them and to show them. And like Jesus embodied what he was teaching. And then I love every time he had a moment where he was either speaking something very difficult or he just healed someone, he would take his disciples aside and explain it. He's like, here's what I did here. And here's the explanation of the seeds. The seed that fell here is this. The seed that fell there is that. And he was explaining it to his disciples, but the crowd didn't get to hear that. But he was training his disciples of like the why, the how, the who, the when, and then he embodied it, and then he sent them out to do the same. He sent them out to 2 by 2 to go and minister to people, to proclaim the good news that the kingdom of heaven is here. And so even we see how Jesus himself embodies and perpetuates and teaches masculinity and faith and how to live and how to be to the next generation by simply living with them, by embodying his teaching. And that's huge. And I think that we can't underestimate the power of emulation, of embodying who we want our sons to become, and the men that we want our daughters to receive, as husbands later on, right? And just even their confidence, and I love that the confidence of, like you said, in your relationship with River, like you've been disciplining him all these years, and that's why he has respect. That's why he's known as an honorable man now, in the church, with people. But also the way that your wife has been able to pour into your children is because she has a biblical and godly man, biblically masculine man at home. That is her cover, that is her protector, and so she can walk in her femininity fully to live into her femininity, and raising up your children. And being that helpmate with you in the home. So, so Bryce, just share with us some of the ways in which you've seen Shane over the course, or in some of the boys that came to Man Camp. How have you seen after post Bar Abba this last year? How have you seen some changes in his own life and in the lives of these other guys.
These are just the secondary consequences of what we're going after. Julian is one of our openers at church now, and he does it so confidently. And even in that process, there's still a discipleship that happens. He's very well spoken. He's got a deep, manly voice, so it works for him. Huh? But like he would do the greeting and like keep his eyes down, and we're like, "No, son, lift your eyes up. Be a man, stand up."
The shift of confidence.
Yeah. Nobody told Shane, but he's doing a Bible study on Friday nights after school with a couple of his friends.
Dude.
Like, he didn't even ask, which I love. He doesn't need to ask, but he wasn't home on a Friday night. It's like 6 p.m. and I'm blowing his phone up like, "Shane, where are you at, boy?" And he's like, "Dad, I'm doing Bible study at the church with my friends." I'm like, rad.
Well, you should have told me. But
And like, I love the story that comes out of there. They were just reading in the book of John. And this one boy that was there just started to weep. They were just reading the word. And that's the power of the word.
Wow. Yeah.
And not because of Shane, but maybe because of the example. He's had two of his friends get baptized. We just baptized one on Sunday last week. And it's all a secondary consequence of Shane's introduction into manhood and actually walking and living that out.
Yeah, I feel like the shift of identity. I think it's us as men. There's something about we need permission. It's almost like we need the recognition of other men to almost feel like we have the permission to be a man. Like the whole the joking about you do something and like, "Oh, give me your man card." It's you know what I mean. you went up to the urinal right next to the other guy. "Give me your man card, bro." But it's this. We need one another. We need that affirmation and confirmation of our identity. And it's almost like, because then it's like you didn't even have to tell him to start it wasn't your idea for him to start a Bible study. Like, God just continually moves, and he's like, "I'm a man. This is my responsibility," accepting that responsibility. Like, he feels that God is telling him to do this. Like, I'm going to do this because I've been given permission to be a man.
And that's what really stuck out last year at Valor was, it's almost like the media wants to dumb us down, right? Or feminize us. And to see the teachings that went on and other like-minded men that want the same thing, and you realize we're not the minority, we're the majority. We've just been silent.
Right.
And now to see with biblical teaching what a man should be or a young man should be brought up in, that was eye-opening for me to see that kind of teaching.
Yeah,
because you don't see that in all the churches either.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that's driven by, butts and seats and wokeism and whatever else springs in the dollars.
Or just trying to keep people from leaving, so don't want to be too offensive.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to offend anybody, so let's just smooth it all out.
Yeah. What were some of those things that you were talking about? Because you said you're talking about the teachings last year that were, can you tell us, maybe kind of share with us some of the teachings specifically that you're talking about and how they landed with you, how they impacted you?
Well, I wish I had my notes because I could refer back to them, but I took a lot of notes at that. And just some of the teachers you brought in, anywhere from the retired Army gentleman, what he taught, and seeing that, and the stuff that you brought in, Bryce, and just teaching that we're men of valor, the whole description that you gave. It's like, it was so eye-opening and so refreshing to have that, because you just don't see that. The last, say, 4, 6, 8, 10 years, you don't see that. It's more about squishing the Christian male, right, in our society. Excuse me. And that's what was so appealing to me, even before I went to Valor Man Camp, just seeing the advertising, the manly man of Bryce being modeling the sweatshirt.
Yeah.
But just what they talked about, even from the stage at C3, what they talked about Valor Man Camp. It just had a different ring to it that I think we needed. And the teachings were unbelievable. And I can't recall all of them, but it just had that presence of manliness and what a man's supposed to be instead of what we've been, what they've been trying to teach us what a man should be, you know, in society and in media. And that's all a lie, you know. The truth is in the Bible. Well, and that's what brought Valor home to me.
Yeah. Isn't that what it's all about? I think like one of the biggest discrepancies that we have in the church today is we're not walking in our identity.
Exactly.
And so being able to help these young men walk into their identity, to see them outside the church and in the church actually becoming the men that they were designed to be, is such a beautiful thing, because we're missing that. We're missing the fact that we were called as men to rule the earth and to have authority over it,
and to not apologize,
and to not apologize
wade through
for
the
it.
lies that are
Absolutely.
net out in society today, where they want to control us and feminize us, and that's so true. I mean, they just if they can be, as young men, brought up in a biblical way, this is the truth, this is what the lies are, and this is the gray area.
Right. I see, like in Scripture, like just the way in which God works and operates with men. I mean, this is where we got valor from, right? We got valor from Judges chapter 6, verse 12, where Gideon is like hanging out in a wine press area and trying to thresh, wheat. You know, if you know anything about a wine press, it's down because you don't want stuff to blow into it. So it's down out of the wind. And what do you need? But what do you need to thresh wheat? You need wind, right? So, but why is he down there? It's because he's afraid. He's afraid of the enemy, and because they've been persecuting them for a long, long time. They're enemies, and he's hiding. He's hiding in the wine press, doing something that he's not supposed to be doing in hiding. And so I feel like that's such a picture of 21st century American masculinity.
Christian males.
We're hiding.
Yeah.
Like there's this feeling of like our enemies have surrounded us, and they've made us believe that we are weak and powerless, and that God is not with us, that somehow we've been abandoned by God or God's power or God's faithfulness or God's provision, God's protection. And so we have to silence, we have to kind of make ourselves less and be almost like ashamed of who we are in Christ. But then God comes down, the angel of Yahweh comes down, and he says, "The Lord is with you. Yahweh is with you, O mighty man of valor." And Gideon's probably like, "Wait, who are you talking to? Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, I don't know what you're talking about, God. I'm hiding. I'm here hiding. Who's a valiant man here? I don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about that ant over there, but But he said he first comes to him with this identity, and also a reminder that Yahweh is with you, and that's how you can be a man of valor. And what does that mean? Like to be, what does that word valor mean? It means to live boldly, bravely, with great courage. To live in the face of conflict, in the face of danger, in the face of whatever is coming at you, with bravery and great courage.
See, and you don't see that taught in society at all. And in most churches, probably across the world, but mainly in the U.S., you don't see that. And that's what was so impactful about Valor. That's why I'm on this leadership team, is to bring that forward, because it's been missing in all the churches, not all the churches, but a majority of them, I mean, look at what COVID did to churches. Look what it did to families. Look what it did to society.
Yeah.
And we have our own opinions on that.
Right.
But still, look at what they have been installing and trying to create in our society.
Right.
And to see a group of men start in Montana this type of ministry is impactful. And who knows where it'll go. And who knows what other ones are across the nation like this.
Because I think there's even like a lot of people, I think then there's probably a lot of reasons, a lot of backing to why there's been this desire to kind of what's the word? Diminish masculinity and call it toxic, right? Masculinity is toxic. Well, why is that? Why is that a part of our culture? You think about it. Well, because masculinity has been abused. You know, men or boys who can shave, who just are angry, and they're taking their authorability and turning it into destructibility, and they're destroying people and families by their power. By the power that God has given men. And so that's why there's been this fear of these boys who are out of control. Like they're strong physically and they're just destroying things in their wake. Yeah. Right. But that's not godly masculinity. No. And so that's where I think where your session came in last year, is that being good and dangerous is like what the context from like the Jordan Peterson phrase. What was that phrase? What was that quote? To be good, you have to be capable of great violence. Because if you're not, then you're not weak, or you're not good. You're harmless. Is that the phrase? Like,
sure, I'm going with it.
Got that one?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah. And so it's like, but that it's great strength under control. Like masculinity is great strength under control.
And that's so good, because you see so many men feel powerful because, they're in the gym, they're lifting weights, they look good, females are attracted to them, but then they abuse all of that, whether it's through pornography or sexual sin or any of that. And it's not guided through biblical actions of masculinity.
Right. Kind of like you were talking about with your sons, like teaching him how to have his masculinity under control when he's with his girlfriend.
And respect for her.
Respect, yeah.
And for other women as well. I mean, you've all seen men, I have family that I just found out about some things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to tear that guy's head off, for abusing that type of situation, instead of being the leader of the household and saying, no, this is what we do, so it's I don't know, it's like you said, it's resurrecting, I guess, the manlyhood in our homes and teaching other men to do that it's okay to do that, because society would tell you it's not. Right. And you see that all the time.
And I think about the origin story of men, that in the beginning, God created man. God created Adam. And what did he create him to do? He created him to be a co-creator, like to be a cultivator. Like he took the man, put him in the garden, and then he had him like naming animals and cultivating the garden, like, and probably weeding. I don't know if they had weeds back in the Garden of Eden or not. I mean, or they just didn't call them weeds. They called them, dandelions, because they're good. But that's another story. But seeing how we were created to be co-creators with God, or cultivators of what God has made, and we're to cultivate and to bring flourishing, to bring life. And I love that word, shalom in the scripture that we translate as peace. That word shalom doesn't mean like simply just like lack of conflict, but it means life as God intended it to be in the garden. And that word justice only is a thing because of injustice. When there's a breakdown of God's shalom, when there's a breakdown of the flourishing that God had created, justice is the action of restoring that shalom, is restoring that goodness to fullness. Yeah. And so it's like, as godly men, that's what we are gardeners in this world, gardeners of people. Like fishers of men, we're gardeners of people, of men and women. And so we are bringing life and flourishing around us in our lives. Or the question is, or are we bringing destruction? We have great creatability, but also great destructibility. And so how are we training and teaching the next generation, our children specifically? That's what I think about. Like, is it Deuteronomy chapter 6, I believe it is. We'll pull that up. I should have had that queued up.
The Shema.
The Shema. Well, it's the follow-up. This is the great Shema. Listen, Israel. Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. Love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words I'm giving you today are to be in your heart. Here we go. repeat them to your children.
Nice.
Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, and when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. It's like everywhere you go, everything that you do, be reciting all these things that, our God, Yahweh is our God. Love Yahweh with all of our heart, all of your soul, with all your strength. And then, when you do all these things, like you're learning all these things, you're cultivating these things, teach these things to your kids, to your children. And let them in. How do you do that? Well, you make it a part of everything, every part of your life. When you're walking on the road, when you get up, when you lie down, like when you get up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, binding them as a sign on your hand and forehead, like basically like every part about you, how you see, what you do. When you leave your house, you're reminding yourselves of how you're going to live that day, and the way that we wield our creatability for life and flourishing around us. And our children are seeing that, and they're participating, and we're teaching them to participate in that.
I love the fact that Jesus never asked his disciples to do something that he didn't model first. Mm-hmm. That's what I get out of Deuteronomy chapter 6. What are you modeling to your kid? Do they see you getting up, getting your worship on, reading the word, or are you straight on social media? Right. Are you straight watching TV? So what we model to our kids, I mean, like they say, like chivalry's dead. Not in my household. My kids see that. I don't always open the door for my wife, but if we're on a date, 100%. I never let my wife walk on the curb. I told my daughter if I ever see her dating a boy and she's walking next to the curb, I'm jumping out of my car and I'm going to trip that guy.
And again, one of those like, well, maybe he just needs to be taught. He was never taught that.
Right.
So how do we teach? And that's, I think, partnering with like guys that will date Naomi, girls that, when River's dating a girl, like how are we training and working with the boyfriend? Because he might not have a dad at home. It's like, how are we partnering with that boy or partnering with that family to help raise this young man into someone who you want to eventually entrust your daughter to one day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. So, looking at this for any men that are listening to this podcast, if you're an older man, that your kids are out of the house, your son's grown, maybe he's, in the military or whatever, or just gone about raising his family. It's not about what you can get from it as much as it is what you can bring to Valor with your experience in life and raising kids. And the same with younger boys or men coming up, come and learn from mentors that have been through it. Ask them the hard questions. Ask them what I should do in this situation. And that's what Valor's about, is leaning into each other, and gleaning off of each other, those little bits and pieces that might help you. And, so that would be my challenge. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't know if Valor's for me. Well, it may not be for you, but it's what you can bring to Valor to help other men or other boys.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, like the question for this year was even like, are we going to do a Bar Abba this year? Would you do it for just one? I think the answer is yes. Yeah, we would do it for one because of the residual effect that we see happening right now in River's life and Shane's life and these kids that came from fatherless homes, seeing the effect that it's having on their lives. Yes. And not only that, but in our churches, Julian's leading the church on Sunday mornings, and in the community too, raising up young, respectable, confident young men.
And I think you need to strike when the iron's hot, because if that boy goes away, he may not come back next year, right? So we need to strike when the iron's hot.
Right. And even thinking like, because your boys went to, did the Bar Abba, came to man camp. So I wonder even too, like, because you're empowering them to now be a part of, running the Bar Abba, but like, who are their friends that need to come to Valor?
Absolutely.
Invite their friends and then that could even get their dad there, or an uncle or grandpa, whoever is the man in their life, or just inviting them to be, to come and be surrounded by these fatherly figures that they can go home with, and that's like, oh, great, this is a guy that we need to be discipling in our church. Like I'm thinking about one right now in our church. This kid that I want to help raise up, but it's not so much like I want to, but it's like, who can I put into his life? Well, who is a man of valor at our church that I can empower to go and disciple that young boy to be a godly man.
Yeah.
We baptize him in our church, and so it's now like, okay, well, how do we help walk with him in showing him what it means to be a man of God and a man of valor?
And I think, if each of us invite one or two other people, men, boys, whatever, or a unit, father, son, we'll double our numbers for this summer. And that's all it takes.
Right. And like we said, it's not about getting a big camp. It's like, well, no, each one of these men represents
It's
something.
about spreading it.
Right. It's about spreading and making more men of valor.
Exactly.
Well, too, I'm convinced that the church will rise and fall on the backs of men. I mean, God's going to build his church. Let's not go down that road. We all understand
Right,
that.
100%.
But when you look at the majority of churches today, most of them are dying churches, and the women are doing literally everything.
Yeah.
So when we can get men to be activated into their God-given role, dude, our churches are going to flourish. Families are going to be strong. The church will be strong, and that all plays out into our communities.
And that's what I meant earlier
Yeah.
when I talked about you saying women-led churches. I meant what Bryce just said.
Right.
Women are doing it all, and the men are not coming to church. So we get the men to engage, and everything changes.
So I think statistics are always on our side, right?
Yeah.
Because even showing that, like if a kid comes to faith in Jesus, there's like a very low percentage that either of the parents are going to come to church. If the mom comes to church and brings the kids, there's a small percent, pretty good but better chance, that the whole family might come. But if the dad comes, if the dad becomes a Christian, it's like 99.99999% that family is going to come to church. That family is going to come to faith in Jesus, and they're going to walk with God. And church and families, and they've shown this as well. Like families, men and women who are engaging in their faith, who are participating in weekly worship, daily prayers, studying scripture, active in their faith. There's like a 99% crazy high statistic, 90-something% chance that couple will stay together for life.
Well, and I remember meeting two guys last year. One was, they had both gone through divorces, and one brought a son, another one, his sons were growing, but they both came and had transformational experiences at Valor that they took back, and one even stepped back into, doing more ministry work as a result of Valor. And he was able to shed all that past that he was suffering from and step forward to be the man that he was at one time before the divorce and came back around. And it's been interesting to watch him as well.
Yeah. Because really that's what we're after, right? Yeah. Is we understand that, like you said, it's God who builds the church, right? It's also God who builds men. And God uses us to build one another, but it's that God uses opportunities that we give him. And so it's like, are we going to say yes to being in God's presence? Are we going to say yes to being the men that God wants us to be? And do we believe that what God wants us to be is good? And so that's what Valor is. It's an opportunity to leave the whole, like the hustle and bustle of life, the busyness, the busy schedule, the demands, the responsibilities of, I wouldn't say like leaving the responsibilities, but like, leaving the immediate responsibilities and going out into the mountains, going to the summit, right? To have a summit moment, like this moment of importance, this of just vitality, this vital meeting at the table, like, the Knights of the Round Table, coming together at the table, having this summit meeting of all the men of dominion and authority that God is bringing together. which is all the men who come, in order to be in his presence. And because God, when men come into his presence, things happen.
Yeah.
Changes happen, shifting in life changes happen. When we say yes to getting into God's presence.
And the other thing is, if you can't make it for the entire weekend, I mean, it basically starts Friday evening, right? So that's
Thursday night.
Thursday night,
Yeah.
sorry. And it goes Friday, right? And then Saturday, you're done by what, 1? So, but a lot of men came and could only participate in a half a day, or maybe on Friday the whole day, and then they had to leave. But they got something from it, and they contributed as well. So if you can only come for a little bit, do that. That's better than not coming.
Like God will use our not enough and make it more than enough.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Of course, that's not our desire.
Yeah.
Hope and pray that they would take off the whole time, because it's really not even that much time. It's Thursday evening, so after work, come up there, and so basically just taking that one day, all day Friday, and then getting home by in the afternoon on Saturday, and so, but yeah, like you said, like I think that there's so much about Man Camp that is so powerful. I think because it's more like we're trying to create an opportunity and a setting for God to work. Like we're not coming into this, macho fest. I mean, we do masculine fun things. We love the gladiator games. So much fun, and we recognize that, like men, we like to have fun. Like we like to shoot guns. We like to split wood. But there's this element where it's not about just simply this macho testosterone fest. It really is focused on how can I become a godly man? How can I just encounter the presence of God? And that's really our desire. Like you said earlier, like we just want to see men transformed by the presence of God. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on our Valor Man Cast. And again, I wanted to invite you guys to our Valor Man Camp, July 31st through August 2nd out at Temple Hills. Go to valorministries.org to find out more information about our ministry. And also you can go to valormancamp.com to go straight to the Man Camp website itself. So check it out. We'd love to see you guys there. We'll see you next time.